Hello everyone, this is Carlos Infante coming to you from Mexico City. As you can hear, it's actually raining right now. I've been trying to record this video for a while now. You know, have been some interruptions in doing this. I'm trying to maybe uh, make it a little bit shorter. The last recording I did was a little over a half hour, so 30 minutes plus. Uh, so I'm just hopefully try to get this thing going quicker. Uh, I mean, because for Tomorrow by Brian Azzarello and Jim Lee, it has a very simple plot, the main plot at least, which is basically, a year before the story starts, a million people vanished, and Superman is trying to find them, uh, and he does, but and that's the whole thing, a million people vanish, Superman tries to find them and rescues them, uh, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on within this little plot, and before get into the whole thing, uh, I actually read this when it first came out on a monthly basis, and it wasn't a very good experience. As a monthly book, the story does not work. After having read the whole 12 12 issues together, or almost together, almost one sitting, I just read besides issue 204 and 215, which I read all by themselves. The rest of the book, the rest of the issues, I read 2 issues per day. The story, works better. It doesn't flow better because, it has some really awkward um, pacing. It starts slow. The each issue doesn't feel like a very satisfactory thing. There's some action, but uh, you don't feel you get a lot of out of each issue. Like most books today. I mean, when you read any um, book today, I mean, from DC, you get more out of it. Uh, of course, the early 2000s, it was known as the time when comics were written for the trade. So you had 6 issue arcs, 12 issue arcs, that would fit perfectly as a trade paperback, in a hardcover. So it does feel like For Tomorrow was written for the trade because you just get bits and pieces out of each issue, and you sometimes feel, or it feels, reading it now. I felt then, that there's nothing really going on within an issue. You usually kind of get the payoff, 1 or 2 issues later. So this at that time, the reviews were mixed. Not a lot of people still have certain apprehension against that particular this particular story. I do. I mean, I hadn't read the story since it came out, so I had forgotten some things. Some things I kind of remembered wrong. The only character I actually remembered out of that story was this guy Orr, who was a mercenary. Let's see, which is this guy. This is Orr. Um, hope you can see him. Um, you know, this guy, or um, who is some sort of mercenary. He's actually working for a mysterious group of people. He has in his charge this other guy, uh, this guy, Ekus, which, he looks like a monster. And, for all intents and purposes, he is a monster, but he's basically a man. Uh, he's a guy who had been modified by this organization. And actually, Echoes, this organization, sort of, have repercussions for the rest of the DC universe, which, I'll mention when we get to that part of the story. Um, so, as I was saying, it reads a whole lot better full, as a full read, than it did, well, reading the whole thing, you look for the trade, or you want the individual issue, you should, not read one issue at a time or a random issue at a time, because you probably won't really get what's going on, because it just doesn't feel like you could read it uh, one issue at a time. It just feels kind of short. Uh, it's not designed that way, I guess. So, anyways, so the stories I mentioned, a million people vanished from the world, including Lois. Superman is looking for them. So the first half is told in flashbacks. Superman comes to this priest, Father Daniel. He's going through some things himself. He also has his little crisis of faith, because as we learn, he's got cancer. At first we don't know, and so he tells the father about the incident that occurred before the vanishing and some stuff that happened after. So Superman wasn't there when the vanishing happened. He was in space helping, Green Lantern, Kyle Rayner, uh, with a few with a problem he had. So after he frees, Green Lantern from the bad guys, he just thought, no, I'll be okay, blah 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 blah. Superman goes back to Earth and he doesn't find anyone. The streets are empty, and various parts of the world seem to be empty as well. So Superman, through his fortress, um, locates the uh, the machine that caused the vanishing, because of sort of like ripple effects of the energy that was used to do the vanishing. So he locates it in a Middle Eastern country that's in conflict, and Superman, who usually doesn't take sides on any political issue, is kind of tired of human pettiness, that he decides to practically, stop the whole thing right then and there. He destroys the weapons, and the tanks, and he sort of, stands there as maybe a god or something like that, and everybody sort of, you know, stops, except for this one kid who throws a sun at Superman. The rest of the people didn't like that, and they pretty much killed the kid, through stoning. So, one of the consequences of Superman, kind of being more proactive, or, taking a stand. You Um, anyways, so he finds a guy called Knox, Yeah, he's maybe the rebel leader who decides to take over the country. He is a guy who actually owns the who has the machine. You know, it's an orb. It's an orb. Um, but he has with him this guy Ekus, who Superman discovers is not some weird alien creature or whatever. You know, it's a guy that's been heavily modified. Um, so him and Ekus fight. You know, he meets Or, Superman meets Or. You know, they're fighting. You know, the whole thing. And then the machine once again turns itself on. Echoes and Noctis appear. Now Justice League, you know, finally decide to do something. So they confront Superman about, you know, his invasion to this southern country, uh, and about the second vanishing. Superman actually does get the orb and does take it with him to his fortress. You know, Superman says, you know, leave me alone, you know, trust me, I know what I'm doing. But they don't, you know, there's like a bit of a confrontation, you know, like a stare match between Aquaman and Superman. Um, and then, you know, after his confrontation with Aquaman, Superman ends up fighting, you know, these sort of elemental creatures that, you know, threaten Superman that, you know, we're gonna destroy, we're gonna destroy the whole population of the world, get out of here, you know, we're gonna destroy the city that took you in. And, you know, finally Superman says, you know, you can kill the whole world, you can rid of the whole population, but I'm still gonna be here. And you know what? I'm gonna destroy the world, and you won't be here. And when he means destroy the world, he basically means destroy the earth, you know, by creating, you know, environmental calamities. So, you know, the creatures back off. We learned that some sort of goddess was the one who summoned these creatures, and then Wonder Woman shows up. But now, why she shows up, you know, how she knows this goddess, or you know, human goddess or witch or whatever. Then you know, Or shows up as well for I don't know what reason. He wants the one of the knives that this woman has. Um, I don't know. I mean, I didn't get the explanation to that. How does you know Wonder Woman shows up with this other woman who's sort of like a goddess or sorceress or witch or you know I don't know, and then Or shows up as well. I don't know how he knows where to find Wonder Woman and what this woman other woman is. You know that I don't get. But you know, Or tells Wonder Woman that Superman's got the machine, you know, the orb that caused the vanishing. You know, then I believe it's in issue 211, you know, where Super Wonder Woman we see her climbing uh, uh, Superman's fortress, which at that time was like sort of like a tesseract, you know, circular fortress he had in the Arctic. She climbs up there, um, uh, to confront Superman. Superman, you know, had taken the priest to the fortress, which, by the way, I forgot to mention. The priest had been contacted by Or several days earlier, I guess, and he had been injecting him with some sort of chemicals, which seemed to have some sort of tracking device as well. So Wonder Woman's, you know, climbing up the fortress. Or comes as well. There's a huge battle between, you know, Wonder Woman and Superman. You know, Wonder Woman thinks he might use the machine on himself to commit suicide or something. Superman finally understands what the machine is all about. Starts to remember, I guess, would be the word of what the machine is. And he tells Wonder Woman, it's gonna be okay. Um, it's gonna be okay. I know what I'm doing. I know the people that vanish are safe. And Wonder Woman thinks, just hopeful thinking. In the end, Superman turns on the machine and goes and vanishes. We learn that it was Superman who actually created the machine in the first place. It's a sort of a phantom zone projector. And so he went into the phantom zone to create a world where if Krypton were if Earth had a similar fate to Krypton, Superman would be able to save everybody. So he created the orb, uh, sort of like the key to enter this world. He created three robots, which is a Clark robot, Jor-El, and a Lara robot, who will be guarding this little idyllic world that Superman created within the Phantom Zone. And it all really came out because one night, you know, Lois asked Superman, what would happen if Earth had a similar fate to Krypton? Would you send our son to another planet? So Superman thinks that by creating this alternate world, he would be able to have the resources. He had the resources to save an entire world if, Earth had a similar fate to Krypton's. So we start seeing how he thinks, his father, Jor-El, saved him from Krypton's fate by sending him to Earth. Uh, he couldn't really save the rest of the planet. So because Jor-El spared his life, suddenly Superman is responsible for an entire world as well, or he feels responsible for an entire world as well. So he tries to save the world by creating, an escape route from destruction. Of course, Lewis says that maybe nobody should really know about it, and Superman thinks that everybody should know about it except one person, and that would be him. So he sort of made himself forget that he had actually created this whole thing, in the first place, this whole world in the first place. Uh, but no, in those final maybe three issues, when Superman's within this idyllic world he created, um, some people, really, didn't really like the idea of being in there. So, Zod's in the Phantom Zone. And so so these people joined Zod against, this these idyllic world, which Lewis called Metropia, sort of like a metropolis, utopia thing. So they're constantly attacking, but the robots, are constantly defending from the attack. So really nothing serious happened. So with Superman in there, Zod finally Superman confronts Zod. Zod says, you sent the key to my own freedom, and I sent it back so that you could come here, and I get my revenge against you because you invaded, my world, which is the Phantom Zone, which is this darkness, empty void, and suddenly there's a light, and I don't like the light. I don't like what you did. You invaded, my world as well. So there's sort of like a huge fight. So this is where it really gets exciting because there's a huge fight, that goes on. I think like 2 issues between Zod, and Superman. Echoes is there as well. So Echoes wants his revenge against Superman. So there's this huge fight, and finally the whole world, it's just crumbling, falling apart. So Superman finally sends everyone home. But before that, during this whole battle, and even before that whole thing started, Superman had actually sent the orb back to Earth to the priest. But the priest, having captured by Orr, was being modified, to be someone similar to Echoes, become, sort of, this monstrous type thing, all full of drugs and, this sort of cybernetics added to it, making him, aggressive, controllable killing machine. We learned actually that this is like these are prototypes of the OMAX that would be showing up in Infinite Crisis. So these are like prototypes. So this little story uh, that actually does have relevance. Sorry, relevance to the For Tomorrow storyline as well. Also affects the rest of the DC universe later on. Um, you know, so the priest is modified, but they decided to shut it down. In fact, they were able to pretty much heal cancer, I guess. That's because they used this cancer cell sort of like a template for the whole genetic modification. So again, Superman sends the orb back to Earth to the priest. The priest activates it. He's able to escape. Goes in, vanishes back into the Phantom Zone. So whatever control Orr had, which he really didn't have much. Now this is a very willful man. So his willpower sort of overrode the 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 control, the programming that Orr had put into him, and with him vanishing, the whole thing just uh, it's it's a moot point. He loses contact with the father. The father shows up, in the Phantom Zone. Superman fights him first, but then realizes, oh, it's the father. And poor Father Daniel, he's suffering with all these modifications, all these drugs, all these, implants, that he just begs Superman to kill him, but he doesn't do it, because there's this whole fighting going on, So then it echoes versus, the modified Father Daniel. The world is falling apart. Finally Superman sends everyone home. He tries to save Zod, but of course Zod doesn't want to be saved. He just wants to get the last laugh on Superman, I guess. So everyone returns to Earth, um, and the issue ends with Superman going to South America to, I guess it's the Amazon jungle, rainforest, but there's like this pyramid that would serve as his new fortress of solitude, but it's a pyramid in the style of a Mexican pyramid. It's not. So I always dislike the fact that uh, every artist kind of thinks that Mexico is South America or whatever. We're North America, but you can see I hope you can see it. Um, there it is. The pyramid. That's a very Mexican Aztec pyramid. There aren't, as far as I know, there aren't any pyramids like that. In South America, in the Amazon, or Peru. They're completely different types of construction. But anyway, so he goes to the Amazon rainforest and uh, and creates a new fortress of solitude. And I think that is a very good way of ending the story, of closing, because at the beginning we kind of see a very detached Superman, you know, his own fortress, the original fortress, or his fortress of solitude, is in the Arctic, so it's barren, cold, barren land with no life. So going into the rainforest for his new fortress of solitude, and kind of changes everything, because we're in where there was once nothing. He goes to a place where there is life. All those trees and animals, plant life. So it kind of brings Superman from, I guess, Azarella kind of put him like here, above us, above us, sort of like very much godlike, and then brings him down here, so being at the top of the world, in the Arctic, with this Arctic fortress, he was, disconnected from life, because there's nothing in the Arctic, as I mentioned. So bringing him down to South America, where there is life for a second, Fortress of Solitude sort of takes a detached, cold, godlike Superman to, back to our level as a human being, embracing life. I mean, one of the images, uh, that pretty much sums up, that sort of view that Azarella did put Superman in, is something like this, you know, that image of Superman almost coming down, like, maybe some sort of divine uh, being. So bring him to more of a level, human level, I guess you could say, because I think that was very interesting. Oh, sorry about that. So yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a very subtle story. They're so subtle at times, that, as a monthly read, you don't get. And, again, even if you read it together, you might find that the beginning is kind of slow, and then it just finally starts moving forward. Because halfway through the story, though, it takes place in the here and now, if you will. It's not, uh, to say the least, um, it's no longer, it catches up to the to what's happening now. Of course, there's the flashbacks at the end where we learn what Superman actually, did, uh, and how he got to that point where he actually created the orb. But after halfway, we don't. It moves forward. Superman doesn't really talk to the priest anymore. No, it takes him to the fortress, and from the fortress, we go to the Phantom Zone, and so there's no real. So it just changes the whole story, sort of, But like I said, there's, the pacing sort of picks up, you know, at the middle, at the middle, you know, it just moves faster than at the beginning, where where there's more story coming through the art than through dialogue or captions. And but then the rest of it, more dialogue, more caption, more action. I guess that would be it. So yeah, I mean, I think if you're interested in reading it, get the trade. Don't get the individual issues, or if you do, get them all, or read them when you get the 12 issues. It reads a lot better. Don't read a random issue. If you find say issue 211, you want to read it, you should just get the whole run, or just get the whole trade, because it just reads. You get more out of it as a whole package than as single issues. So anyways, those are my thoughts on a mini review of Superman for tomorrow. I guess it went a little bit long, but there there is a lot of stuff going on in that story that I needed to say, because there's just a lot of stuff that happens, but it just happens too slowly, and there's no real payoff until several issues later. So anyways, tell me what you think, and see you next time. So until then, keep smiling.